Imagine holding pieces of ancient scrolls that could change everything we thought we knew about where the New Testament came from. Buried for almost 2,000 years, these fragile pieces of parchment, found in the Qumran caves, famously known as the home of the Dead Sea Scrolls, might actually contain parts of the Gospels. These are the same words that helped shape Christianity. But here's the big question: why hasn't the world fully accepted this amazing discovery? What if I told you that parts of the New Testament were hidden among these ancient writings, even before some of the prophecies in them came true? Today, we're exploring the incredible research of Professor Jose O'Callaghan, the scholar who boldly claimed that some of these fragments are from the New Testament. We'll look at what this could mean for how we understand history, prophecy, and faith. The Dead Sea Scrolls, discovered between 1947 and 1956 in caves near the Dead Sea, are one of the biggest archaeological finds of the 20th century. These ancient writings, which date back to the Second Temple period, give us valuable insights into the beliefs and religious life of the Jewish people living at that time. Most of the scrolls include Old Testament writings and other Jewish texts, but some scholars, especially Professor O'Callaghan, believe that a few fragments may actually be from the New Testament. If true, they could have been written before the destruction of Jerusalem in 70 AD. The Qumran community, which lived on the northwest side of the Dead Sea, was made up of a Jewish group often linked to the Essenes. They lived separately from others and were focused on protecting their holy writings. The scrolls they left behind include Bible manuscripts, community rules, and writings about the end times, which they believed were near. This community was eventually wiped out by the Romans in 68 AD, just 2 years before the Second Temple fell. And here's where things get even more interesting. If fragments of the New Testament really were found among these scrolls, it would mean that parts of the Gospels were already being shared and seen as important long before the Bible, as we know it today, was fully put together. The 70 AD cataclysmic events and the discovery of Fragment 7Q5 are among the most important and controversial findings from Qumran. This small piece of parchment contains partial words that closely match Mark 6 verses 52 to 53, which talks about Jesus and his disciples arriving at Gennesaret. The passage says, "For they had not understood about the loaves. Their hearts were hardened. When they had crossed over, they landed at Gennesaret and anchored there." Professor Jose O'Callaghan carefully studied this fragment, comparing the visible letters to both biblical and non-biblical ancient texts. He found that the letter sequences matched this passage from the Gospel of Mark perfectly. His research showed that no other known texts from the time had the same letter combination and spacing, making it very likely that this fragment is from Mark's Gospel. Fragment 7Q4 contains part of a phrase that might match 1 Timothy 3 verse 16, especially the phrase "appeared in the flesh," was vindicated by the Spirit, was seen by angels, was preached among the nations, was believed on in the world, was taken up in glory. Fragments 7Q8 and 7Q12 may match parts of Romans 10 verses 8 to 9 and Mark 4 verse 28. The passage from Romans says, "But what does it say? The word is near you, it is in your mouth and in your heart," that is, the message concerning faith that we proclaim. If you declare with your mouth, "Jesus is Lord," and believe in your heart that God raised him from the dead, you will be saved. The passage from Mark says, "All by itself, the soil produces grain. First the stalk, then the head, then the full kernel in the head." Callaghan identified these fragments as matching the specific wording and context of these New Testament passages, suggesting that they may have come from these texts. He used a detailed comparison method, looking at letter sequences, spacing, and context from a wide range of ancient texts to pinpoint the most likely sources. His analysis concluded that these sequences uniquely matched New Testament writings. However, Callaghan's conclusions have been criticized. Some scholars believe that the fragments are too small and incomplete to make definitive claims, suggesting that other undiscovered texts could have similar sequences. Despite this, Callaghan's findings have sparked ongoing debate and further research into the presence of early Christian texts among the Dead Sea Scrolls. The fact that several fragments match New Testament texts so closely strongly supports their authenticity according to biblical and Christian tradition. The existence of these fragments during that time, and the fact that they fit together so well and are found in such large quantities makes it reasonable to think they are from the New Testament. If these fragments really are from early Christian texts, it would suggest that these writings were already in circulation before the destruction of Qumran in 68 AD. This would mean the New Testament books were written while the apostles and people who lived during Jesus' time were still alive, which gives strong evidence that they were written early on. This timeline is important because it lines up with major historical events, like the destruction of the Second Temple in 70 AD and the fall of Qumran shortly before that. If the fragments were at Qumran before it was destroyed, it means the texts were already known and valued by early Christian communities, maybe even before the Gospels became widely spread. For instance, a fragment from the Gospel of Mark could suggest that it was written and shared within a few decades of Jesus' death. This matches the idea that Mark's Gospel was written in the 60s AD, supporting the early church's belief that it was written by John Mark, a companion of the Apostle Peter. Additionally, the presence of these fragments at Qumran, a community usually linked to Jewish teachings, adds more weight to the argument. The texts and writings from the Apocalypse suggest that early Christian and Jewish communities interacted more closely than we once thought. The fact that Christian writings were kept alongside Jewish scriptures shows how important these texts were in the first-century religious world. This idea connects to Luke 21 verses 20 to 24, where Jesus predicts the destruction of Jerusalem. If these texts were written and spread before 70 AD, it gives more weight to Jesus' prophecy, showing that it was recorded before it came true. The fall of Jerusalem and the destruction of Qumran would then act as historical events that confirm the timing and authenticity of the New Testament writings. In short, the possible discovery of New Testament fragments among the Dead Sea Scrolls changes our understanding of when these texts were written and highlights their historical importance. It suggests that the Gospels and Epistles were written earlier than some have thought and were widely shared and respected by early Christian communities, even in places as remote as Qumran. If you found this look into early Christian history interesting, please like, share, and subscribe for more content that uncovers the deep connections between faith and history. We'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Thanks for watching, and God bless.